Hi, and welcome back to the Save It for Parts channel. In this video, I wanted to talk about an interesting software-defined radio that is built into an all-in-one package, the HackRF 1 Portapack version. Now, you've seen me play around with the HackRF 1 in the past. I have one of these that New Elect sent me. This is the original kind of genuine version, although when I say genuine, that's a little bit open-ended because this is an open source design, and while the branded one, the New Elect one, is a little bit more expensive and maybe made with a little bit higher standards, there are a ton of third-party makers who build these HackRF 1 software-defined radios for a little bit cheaper. Now, they are still a little bit more expensive than the traditional software-defined radios that I normally mess with, the little USB dongles like the RTL SDR. These guys are around $40 to $50, where the genuine HackRF 1 is a few $100s. The knockoffs are maybe $100 for a very basic one. Now that is just for the packaged SDR that you plug into your computer. The Portapack is a version that puts the HackRF 1 SDR into an all-in-one portable package. So we have basically a standalone little radio device here. It has a built-in battery, it has a touch screen, it has controls, and yeah, this is an SDR that you can put in your pocket and bring out into the field without needing a laptop, without needing a computer. All you need is this little guy. So this is a pretty handy evolution of SDR technology that lets you bring it along wherever you go. Now, I have a couple of these Portapacks. These two were sent to me by viewers. One of them was from Mr. W and one is from Johnny Waldus. I'll put Johnny's TikTok down below. And I feel a little bad that I have not gotten around to these yet. I've used the Portapacks briefly in a couple videos, but I have not yet featured them in a real review or a video specifically about these. And I have just been so overwhelmed with projects and so behind on my video backlog that these are things I got back at the beginning of 2025, or I think in one case back in 2024. And I am just now in the middle of 2025 finally getting around to really doing something with them. So I do apologize to the folks who sent these in. Now, both of these are slightly scratch and dent, which is just fine. When people send me stuff, I never expect the newest and cleanest stuff. I am happy to take other people's cast-offs from their junk drawer, and I think other people are sometimes happy to send me things if I'm actually going to use it, whereas they would just have it sit around in the aforementioned junk drawer forever. One of these actually came with a really nice 3D printed case that protects the little knobs and buttons on the front, and you can put an antenna in here as well. Although I found that I had to do a little bit of modification with some wire cutters to make the antenna actually fit, at least one of these antennas that I have here. So these are pretty standard. They both come with the Mayhem firmware, which is the standard firmware for the Portapacks. This one is an H2 with a metal case, which is kind of nice for reducing radio frequency interference. And this one is an H2 Plus with just a plastic case. I don't actually know a lot about the difference between those two models. Each of these also has a micro SD card slot, and we can put new firmware on that. We can record things that we capture from the radio spectrum onto the SD card. Now, I've played around with these a little bit, and one thing that I am still mystified is exactly how you turn these on and off. Turning them on isn't actually all that hard. When you plug in USB, they will turn on, and then they will never turn off again as long as they're plugged into USB. When they are out on their own here, I think we just want to push the center knob, and that should turn these on. This one takes a couple tries sometimes. Now, to turn them off, I've heard various things. I've heard you can double tap either the center knob or the center select button here. That never seems to work for me. I've heard you can double tap the spinny knob here, and that actually worked this time. Oddly enough, that usually doesn't work for me. So I don't know if it depends what mode you're in or if you're in a sub-menu. You can also hold down these center buttons and eventually they will turn off, but it takes a good like 10 to 20 seconds of holding these down to get the things to shut down. So that's just a little weird idiosyncrasy with the things that still hangs me up to this day. As I said, these both have the touch screens. They both have the same Mayhem firmware. They're pretty much identical. This one, the screen seems a little bit brighter. That might be because it's the H2 Plus. It's a little bit more readable. So I'm looking at the receive menus right now. If we go back, this one has just now shut down. So The batteries on these are a little bit flaky. I think I need to charge this one a little more. Now these can also work as a traditional software-defined radio hooked up to a computer. That's what this HackRF mode is. So if we put it into the HackRF mode, it basically just becomes a USB peripheral. So now I would hook it up to a computer and it would just function the same as any other HackRF, just bypassing the screen, the onboard controls, all of that stuff. You might be familiar with a few of the options on here. I've actually taken this particular one out with me on a recent trip. I guess it was actually late 2024. So again, that's how long I've had this before I got around to doing a real video on it. But back in November of 2024, I took this one with me over to Oregon, and we were able to use some things like the AIS boat receiver. And this picks up boat transponders, basically vessel ID transmitters. So this will tell you what kind of fishing boats are around. It will tell you about cargo vessels. It will tell you what the Russian Navy is pretending to be at this particular time. I just saw a article online about the Russian Navy basically faking their transponder ID so they'd look like cargo ships. We're not finding much here because I live in the middle of the country. We do have a few tugboats on the Mississippi River. We have some boat traffic on the Great Lakes that this would pick up, but kind of few and far between, so we're not going to get as much that way. Another very common thing here is the ADS-B receiver, and that is similar to, now this one has shut down again. I thought I had this one charged up for the video, but apparently it is not holding a charge. Man, now this one doesn't work. Yeah, these things are really fun, but just the battery life on them is kind of terrible. I might have to rip these open and see if I can replace the batteries on both of them at this point. I'll just show you some footage I got, again, out in Oregon last year when we went to Klamath Falls, and there's a big base there. I forget if it's Air Force or National Guard, but basically they fly around a lot of military jets, and some of those jets show up on ADS-B. They have transponders transmitting aircraft data, and then you also get aircraft data for commercial airliners, cargo planes, private aircraft, all kinds of other things in the sky. So it's kind of a fun way to see what's flying around overhead. If you have one of these guys, you can get that information directly. You don't need to go through a website. You can also contribute your own data to kind of crowdsourced websites like ADS-B Exchange, which will give people more of that raw aircraft data. It is not filtered by military. It is not filtered by three-letter agencies, so you get everybody's aircraft data, not just the general public, and that's kind of a fun deal. So I'll throw some links to all these websites down below. If I mention stuff like ADS-B Exchange or marinetraffic.com, I'll try to put links to that down below. I threw this one on a power bank just so we could keep playing with it here. That might negatively affect the reception, might get a little bit of noise over the USB connection, but I'm just playing around with it right now. So some of the other options, APRS, that is amateur packet radio, kind of an automated Internet of Things for amateur radio operators. We have just some regular audio stuff here. We can look at the audio spectrum. We have Bluetooth. We can actually look at all the MAC addresses of Bluetooth devices in the room. We have an ERT meter system, so we can look at our smart electric meter. And this POXAG thing here is for paging. I won't look at that too much because it's possible to get some kind of private info that way. There are still like 3 people in the world who use pagers. Like, I think hospitals still use them. They'll take millions of dollars from you in insurance, but they're still using technology from the 1960s. Go figure. Radio sonde is pretty interesting. We can track weather balloons with that. That's a hobby I'd like to get into, so that's something I'll be playing around with in the future. This recon, I believe, is just basically scanning the radio spectrum and kind of giving you a heat map of where there are different signals, where there are the most signals. I'm not 100% sure how this works, but it's something I'm going to have to look into a little bit more. And there are a couple other apps similar to that, like this scanner. You can go through and scan different radio frequencies. This is similar to your old Radio Shack or Uniden scanner system. Likewise, this looking glass gives you kind of a long-term look at radio spectrum activity across a wide range. Capture just gives you a waterfall display, your very standard software-defined radio interface. So we can set our frequency and we can record that baseband. So if we're doing something like weather satellites, if we are recording some kind of interesting radio traffic, we could do it right here on the HackRF Portapack. A couple more utilities here. We can do File Manager. We can look at files on that SD card. Frequency Manager. We can save interesting frequencies. SD over USB, wave view, signal generator, flash utility, calculator. We even have Tetris on here. So if we get really bored with the radio spectrum, we can actually just go in and play Tetris. So that's, I guess, a thing. Yeah, once we've captured something, we could replay it. So if we were doing some kind of sneaky RF hacking, if we wanted to capture something like a garage door opener or a car remote, and yes, I know when I did my Flipper Zero video, people said, oh, those have rolling codes, you can't just capture and replay those. So, but older stuff, if you have older and cheaper remotes, yeah, you can probably capture and replay that through this. Let's say we are listening to a random frequency. Up here at the top, I can actually go through and change things like the capture rate, the frequency. We can turn on and off. I think we can turn on and off the bias T up here somewhere. We can also turn the amp on and off. We can set the gain, both the LNA gain and VGA gain. So all the regular stuff that you have for a software-defined radio on a computer is just up here in this slightly harder to understand format. So I should probably go over some of the other options up here at the top, since I've been kind of ignoring those. We have nighttime mode, or basically turn the screen off. We have screenshot, so we can take a picture of whatever's on the screen here. We have incognito mode, or stealth mode, so when I transmit, that will turn off the screen. If I'm doing something sneaky, that could be useful. This one, I'm not actually sure what that one does. This other one will enable the bias T, so that will enable DC voltage on the antenna, which we do not want to do right now. This one does something that I don't know. This one turns on and off the headphone jack. This one turns on and off the internal speaker. This, I guess that turns off the backlight. And then this last one just tells me that there is an SD card and that it's working. So that's kind of the basics of the top menu bar. So we can also transmit stuff. We have some transmit specific applications, and I don't know what some of these are. We've got Bluetooth transmitter. We've got that POXAG pager thing. We've got APRS, but I don't know what a lot of these are. We've got Burger pager. We have Bluetooth spam. We have a jammer. We have key fob. We have GPS simulator, ADS-B transmitter, S-Painter. I think this will send images over a waterfall. So we're gonna have to play around with this a little bit, and since we have two of these units, we could potentially send from one to the other. The transmitter on a HackRF1 is very low power. It is way under a watt, so the signal really doesn't leave the room, and it definitely doesn't leave the house, especially a house like mine where the whole thing was built during the Cold War, and my house is basically a Faraday cage. I can't even get a good cell phone signal in here. So if I'm playing around with the transmitter on this, it's not going to leave my property. It's not going to leave the room that I'm in. So I'm not too worried about spamming the airwaves with something like this. I'm just going to use a license-free business band frequency just to be completely legal. So we're going to send this out using the Scotty 2 SSTV. This is slow scan television. I've done a little bit with slow scan TV in the past, including from satellites. So this actually sends out the picture using kind of old school modem tones, and if we tune the other HackRF to the same frequency, we should be able to see this picture. Actually, I just realized neither of these has an option to receive SSTV. You can transmit but not receive, so that was a big oversight on the part of the Mayhem firmware programmers. I have an SSTV app on my phone, this Robot 36. Now both of these do have that APRS system, so I think if I set my info field to testing 1, 2, 3 and start transmitting over here, and there it is, that pops right up. So yeah, they can definitely talk to each other if each one has the same protocol on it. So I ended up flashing the firmware on this thing. It took me a few tries and a few hoops to jump through to get it to work. What worked for me is I downloaded the latest stable firmware, unzipped it, put all the unzipped files onto an SD card, then went in and used the flash utility under utilities here, and then I was able to go online and go to the little app website for this and flash the latest nightly build, which has more stuff than the stable version. And that includes some really interesting ones like NOAA APT. So I should be able to use this to get to NOAA weather satellites, which I'm really excited about. And then weather facts, which is something I've had on my to-do list to learn about for ham radio for a while. So that should be fun to play with. Anyway, let's try out that NOAA APT, which means I have to go outside. It is lightly raining, but NOAA 15 should be coming over here actually in a few minutes, so I'd better go out there and get set up. I'm going to take off the extendable antenna here, and I'm going to put on the old V dipole that comes with the RTL SDR kit, because that works a little bit better for the NOAA satellites. All right, I was able to get a little bit of data from NOAA 15, but it wasn't great, and I don't actually know if it's saved anywhere. I haven't quite figured that out yet. It might be something I need to play with more in the future. And there are lots of other utilities in here, like a random password generator. We've got this tuner for musical instruments. We've got a war driving map. If we have geotagged Wi-Fi captures, we can put them on a map. Stopwatch, antenna length calculator, that's always useful. You can say what frequency you want to look at, and if it's a quarter wave, half wave, etc. And this new firmware even has a bunch more games on it. So in case you don't care about the SDR stuff at all and just want a little pocket arcade game, or maybe you want this to look like a pocket arcade game and you don't want people to know it's an SDR, well, this has it all. I'm still finding the on-off modes really inconsistent, even with this new firmware. Sometimes I can single-click this button and it turns on and off. Other times I have to hold down the button. It's really random. Kind of the last thing I wanted to try here before I wrap this video up is the weather facts. I know I'm skipping over tons of options and features here, but I just don't have time to get into every single one of these. This is similar to NOAA APT from satellites, where it's giving you basically an audio tone fax image from a radio system. So this uses the old HF style radios, and I think that the frequency we want for this one is, let's see, I think it's something like 17.146 megahertz. They give these in like kilohertz, which is kind of annoying, but that's the old style radio from like the 1910s. Back when they had just invented the megahertz, they considered that to be high frequency, so it's known as the HF band. And these days, that's kind of an obsolete band that doesn't get used for a whole lot, and everybody's on VHF or UHF. And this might be something that works better at night because of how HF radio propagates through the atmosphere. I tried out the WeatherFax app and I got absolutely nothing, and there could be a number of reasons for that. Again, it's daytime. The propagation from those WeatherFax transmitters is not very good during the daytime. Also, the HackRF is not very sensitive at those low-end frequencies. Also, my antenna is probably not long enough. HF is such a low frequency that you really need just hundreds of feet of antenna, so I should have a wire up in a tree or something. I used to have one of those, but of course as soon as the wind blew, it all fell down, so I don't really have a good HF antenna out there. So I'm going to wrap up this video on the HackRF Portapack. I would like to thank Mr. W and Johnny Waldis for sending me these. I will come back to these in future videos. Like I said, I have many ideas that I did not get around to in this one, and there were many, many features that I just did not cover at all because I didn't have time to mess with them and didn't really understand how to use them. So there is a ton of potential still with the HackRF Portapack. And of course, just using them as a regular HackRF hooked up to a laptop, hooked up to a desktop computer, or even hooked up to a phone. There are many more things you can do with these using desktop or portable SDR software like SDR++, things that I've used in the past that are interesting for satellites and other radio experiments. If you're looking for some of these yourself, I will throw some links down below if I can find any on Amazon. I would probably also suggest eBay if you want some of the knockoff versions, some of the non-branded ones. Not only the HackRF, but also the Portapack enclosure that you can use to expand your existing HackRF if you already own one of the boards, if you already own the one that doesn't have the screen and the buttons and whatnot, you can add that stuff onto it. If you saw something that you want to see more of in a future video, or if you have a favorite HackRF Portapack app that you really like and you would like to see me cover it, throw some suggestions down in the comments. Any ideas that people have, I'm always interested in hearing those. Even if I don't get around to all of them, they are definitely good to learn, and maybe some of those will show up on the channel in the future. I'll put a list of some of my other Patreon supporters up here. These folks really help the channel remain financially independent, they help me make interesting content, and they help keep me from selling out to corporate interests. So if you want to see more of that, Patreon is a great way to support small independent YouTube channels. I hope this has been an interesting video for everyone. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.